Hi, everyone. Welcome to this week's edition of SuperNova Commencements. I'm your host, Kashi Sehgal, and we have a great show for you today, as always. Welcome to everybody, students, young professionals. We even have some APS students joining us today, so we're excited to have you. Our guest today is in the world of sports, but not in the way that you might think. And so we're going to talk about what it means to have a career in the sports world, but maybe not as the athlete. She is in government relations, and I want to dive into one of our newer segments from Steppingblocks, one of our partners. We are going to dive into what that means as a career. I want to give you a few quick thoughts on skill sets and schools. Okay. So the most common background for a government relations career is a bachelor's degree in social sciences and the liberal arts. The average age of the industry is 41. So that's the current age of average age of everybody in the industry. And it's 53% female, which is cool. 4% veteran. The top skills needed for a career in government relations is public speaking. That makes a lot of sense. Government, policy, and outreach. Those are all things you think about when you think of careers with the government or in relation to the government. The skills that make the most, I know everybody's always interested in this. How do I make the most money? Well, that's not always important, but lobbying is by far the best way to make money as it relates to government relations, at least according to the Steppingblocks platform. Strategic communication is another one, public policy, and political campaigns. So get involved in campaigns. This is another reason. Get involved. Okay. Across the country, most of the people in school that came out of school and went into government relations, these kind of make sense. One of them is Florida State. The other three make a lot of sense. University of Maryland, American University, and again, my alma mater, George Washington University. They're all in DC. Makes sense that a lot of people from there would go into industries related to government. But there are a lot of other schools, a lot of other great schools that can prepare you. And you really don't have to major in government or anything government related to get into government. And we're going to talk about that today. So without further ado, I want to bring our guest on screen. Let me pull her up. Hi, Amy.
Hey, how's it going?
So it's going great. Amy Phuong is VP of Government Relations for the Atlanta Hawks and for State Farm Arena, which is where the Atlanta Hawks play. She also used to be Commissioner of Parks and Recreation for the city of Atlanta and lots of other cool things. So we're going to get into all of that with her today. Let's dive right in and get your questions ready for Amy. We'll get to those in a few minutes. Amy, where are you from? Where'd you go to school? What'd you major in? Do you remember who your graduation speaker was? All those things. Tell us about college.
Yeah, so I'm originally from Atlanta, raised in Gwinnett County. I went to Meadow Creek High School, which is, in Gwinnett County. And then after high school graduation, I went to Georgia Tech and majored in international affairs and economics. I was just listening to your stats, Kashi, and it sounds like I meet some of the profile there. Maybe not in terms of alma mater, but very, very proud to have graduated. Actually, I'm a double grad of Georgia Tech. I did both my undergrad and my master's in business administration, or MBA, at Georgia Tech. And so our graduation speaker, from memory, I don't remember his name, but he was the energy secretary at the time under President Bush. And at the time, our institute president, G. Wayne Clough, was on the Energy Council for the United States government. So cool. I guess it was a cool way to have a graduation speaker. But
Dr. Clough was great. I knew him. Yeah.
Yeah.
So Amy, tell us how you got from school to the Hawks and State Farm Arena.
Yeah, I took a very non-traditional path. So when I was in undergrad at Georgia Tech, I was very involved on campus. Did a lot of civic organization. Was also involved in the broader Atlanta community. I served as a youth representative for the local public access television station. There is still such a thing. It's not all cable network.
It's not all streaming.
It's all streaming. It's People TV, and they were trying to really get young folks in careers in television. And so I served on the board there and was involved in a variety of things, most notably student government at Georgia Tech. I was student body president my senior year, and that got me involved in a lot of the different issues that Georgia Tech had to interact with between faculty, the leadership, and the growth of the institute. So during my time as student body president, I led two kind of initiatives. One, the kind of stabilization of all of the business growth that happened on the other side of Fifth Street Bridge. So students who were walking around near the Biltmore, kind of the startup tech space that Georgia Tech has created. That used to not exist. That used to be just kind of a vacant space. And Georgia Tech partnered with the state to improve the Fifth Street Bridge through the Georgia Department of Transportation, but then partnered with one side of it to own real estate and develop that real estate. And on the other side, that's privately held to manage the growth of the tech startup world. And then the second effort that I led as student body president was during the time then Governor Sonny Perdue, who is now the U.S. Agricultural Secretary, was governor and was proposing mid-year tuition hike on all public universities in the state of Georgia. At the time, there was about 81, 82 public universities. Georgia Tech, which is not as commonly known, is a public university and would have been subjected to an unprecedented 10% hike. And of course, students, as you know, you can't necessarily afford tuition spikes, let alone sometimes a meal, let alone school supplies and stuff like that. And we thought that would be detrimental to population of our students, and coordinated an effort co-led with University of Georgia and across all 81 universities to fight that tuition hike, and successfully did so. So the University System of Georgia reversed its course, did not do the tuition hike. And so that's kind of how I got into the world of politics. But then when I left and graduated undergrad, I didn't necessarily want to go directly into government or directly into nonprofit, which is what I did a lot of my internships and co-ops in. So I interned at the Atlanta Opera, at Leadership Atlanta. I felt like there would be somewhat of a ceiling for me from a leadership standpoint if I continued on that track. And so instead, I took a business route and randomly wound up at a supply chain logistics firm doing shipping logistics to inventory management for several years. And that's how I then met a candidate known by Kasim Reed, who ultimately decided to run to be the next mayor. Met him while I was involved in other civic engagements across the city. I had served on a civic board appointed by Mayor Shirley Franklin at the time, and then kind of got my feet more wet both in the Atlanta community and into the politics of Atlanta. So about 6 years in to my private sector career in a random field of supply chain logistics, more industrial engineering than international affairs, I made the leap to go and join the administration when Kasim Reed became mayor. It was after he had won, and then about a year into his first term, and joined him as the first ever chief service officer.
Very cool. Okay, there's so much there. Students, I hope you rewind this. Can you rewind a digital broadcast that really dates me. Okay. Replay that segment because what Amy said was so important. She really talked about how to get involved as a student and how that experience can translate into the real world. That was such a great example. You can make an impact. A public school system, the university system of Georgia is a huge system. I mean, how many schools are in the entire system?
At the time I went to school, it was 81, 82.
81.
There's probably more or less now.
And so you working with other schools and other students as a student affected change statewide. I mean, it's pretty remarkable impact. So students, it's possible. You just have to care and want to get involved, and then just figure it out. Okay, so Amy, we've been talking about government. What is government relations?
Still trying to figure that out. It's a job that doesn't necessarily have parameters, and it depends on the industry. So a traditional, what folks think of government relations, they think of lobbying. So you're down on the Hill or at the state legislature, trying to negotiate whatever policy platform that your company cares about. For us at the Atlanta Hawks, I was brought on initially to really work with local municipal partners. So we have lots of counties, the city of Atlanta government, Brookhaven government, that we were all interested in building broader community partnerships, and then specifically bringing on our major sponsor, State Farm. So I don't know how many folks know that just a couple of years ago, our arena used to be called Phillips Arena. And when we did the major transformation to what it is now, it was about a $250–300 million transformation of the facility to extend the life of the facility. We partnered with a different corporate partner in State Farm. And State Farm had a real kind of agenda to be more directly in the community. And so part of that is to build better basketball courts in partnership with local municipalities. And so leveraging a lot of my previous experience as Commissioner of Parks and Recreation for the city of Atlanta and trying to go to scale in other municipal markets. And so I'm one of a handful of government relations, external affairs folks in the NBA. Most teams do not have a person. I think Memphis has one and Golden State. And then over time, I've been at the Hawks for about 2 years, kind of worked on a variety of topics from, again, getting our community partners out there, to looking at sports betting and how to work with our state elected officials to support a measure on that loosely. And then of course recently with the general election, State Farm Arena was the largest early voting site in Georgia, if not in the country. A lot of my work has changed in the middle of COVID. Like all of us, we're doing this from home, virtually, and so a lot of what I was doing was federal policy monitoring with counterparts. Actually, Golden State and us looked at, are there, in the stimulus packages, are there stuff that we can leverage for our industry as a whole, both in sports industry as entertainment as well. So what a lot of folks don't realize is the Atlanta Hawks, actually, we manage our own facility. Some other sports team, each team does it differently. Some teams, they're in an arena that's managed by a group of folks who manage a bunch of arenas across that region. We manage our own, and so concerts and shows and Disney on Ice, all get managed through our operations team. And so we're constantly looking at if we have to socially distance and add in more protective gear into the facility, what kind of opportunities to partner with the government to ensure that we're safe, we're following local policies, federal policies, as well as getting potential resources to make it safe, just like any other industry, to return back to some normalcy out there. But I say all that to say, it's a ongoing change of work, which makes it very exciting. And again, every industry does it differently, and every company leverages their government affairs, external folks differently. And in a more traditional sense, I think it would be lobbying and getting policy measures adopted.
Sure. You mentioned the voting effort that State Farm had. You really organized I think it's the largest early voter turnout, early voter polling location in the state of Georgia for sure, but probably also in the country. How did you come up with this idea that this sports arena could be a polling place, and how did you make that a reality?
So our CEO, Steve Koonin, is a visionary and really came up with the idea. He was watching the protests unfold in real time just after Memorial Day weekend, early June actually, and the corner of Centennial Olympic Park and Marietta Street sits our arena and our offices. And he's watching these live protests happen and say, how can we lend our expertise to this conversation? And what better way to do it than to allow for folks to exercise their right and the voice to vote. And so this was actually a couple days before the June primary in Georgia, where Georgia became on national news for the long lines. And so we quickly got together. My responsibility in it was to understand our CEO's vision. And our head coach came on alongside very quickly as well, and said, this would be great for folks to be a part of, and as well as our principal owner group and board of governors. And so everybody quickly aligned. It was a matter of trying to figure out what resources we needed. And our CEO made a bold statement and said, not only are we going to lend our facility, but we're going to ask our employees to help volunteer and be deputized poll workers. And so my role in it was to understand, there's a lot of, for folks who aren't familiar, elections are ran by both the state and the county, but specifically the county. So, understanding what the local Fulton County Board of Registration Elections needed. They have to approve it in a transparent manner and in a formal public meeting. They had to have an agreement with the Atlanta Hawks and say, what are we using within your facility? What are the risks, and who's owning what liability? But then in terms of the additional employees who were serving as volunteers as poll workers, what kind of additional training? I am a deputized poll worker. I learned how to register or how to get folks through the voting process. If you showed up and you were voting at State Farm Arena, I might have processed you before you hit the machines. And so I was thinking through with our arena operations team of how to lay out, how to maximize lines, how to make everything more efficient, and really reiterating that this is not an event that when you go and exercise your right to vote, you really just want to do that. You're not coming in to see something else. And so we were very clear very early that's what we were going to be, a library on steroids, and really proud of our leadership and several team members who stepped up. All in all, we had, ranging from greeters to parking attendants to poll workers themselves. We had about 300 total folks who volunteered in the effort.
Wow.
And if you came through State Farm Arena, there's over 40,000 voters who voted early, specifically at State Farm Arena. I think Fulton County saw about 315 early voters. And that has been the record high of any election in the state of Georgia, both for the county and the state. And then, of course, we worked. My role was to also understand state election laws. So as things come up, if there was campaigning too close to the facility, reiterating rules and regulations, allowing for poll watchers, as long as they're certified and within the guidelines of the state's election law of being there. There were a lot of little things that would come up over time in ensuring that we were following state election law as well. But we are extremely proud of our effort. We actually had some players also involved. They were greeters and handed out stickers to voters. We had a unique sticker. If you voted at our site, it was a little peach basketball. And then we also have one for kids too, because part of the experience is a lot of folks had never been to the arena. I mean, if you hadn't been to a game or a show or a concert, this is really a way to open up our facility as a true public community asset. And actually, the arena itself is a public asset that's owned jointly by the city and the county. And the Atlanta Hawks is a private operator specifically for the games and the concerts and stuff. But we wanted to really showcase that we are a public community asset.
Very cool. Well, we're all of us here in Atlanta / Georgia / the country are very grateful for all the work that you guys did at State Farm and the Hawks. It's really remarkable.
I want to mention that we were the very first team to sign on board. And then a lot of my other work was to, as other teams and arenas were looking to do something very similar, helping them look at where they needed to look in terms of rules and regulations, and then ultimately operating a very successful, efficient, smooth, easy voting process for the public.
Yeah. Well, again, so cool. Okay, so I feel like we could talk about this the whole time because it's so topical, but I want to move into your role as Commissioner of Parks and Recreation. First of all, for all you students who are too young to know this, there is a TV show that was called Parks and Recreation, and the head character, her name was Amy. How did you get Amy Poehler to play you on TV, Amy? That's awesome.
It was fun. I used to joke. It was like, oh, I'm Leslie Knope of Atlanta, or Amy, the real Amy P.
There you go.
And we, during this pandemic, I've caught up on the show in all seasons, and we could have probably written better content for them in certain cases. It does ring true if you've ever worked in the office environment or in government. The office or Parks and Rec is very similar in some days. But
well, maybe really, there can be a part 2.
They bring back a reunion and such. Yeah.
Yeah. So more seriously though, really, you spearheaded the design of a construction project. It was a $24 million construction project on the MLK Recreation and Aquatic Center, which is in the Old Fourth Ward here in Atlanta, downtown, south of downtown. Did you have experience running large construction projects and like managing parks and like navigating like laws and things in public spaces? I mean, how did you prepare yourself for all of that? You came from supply chain.
I came from supply chain. And I was, the youngest commissioner at the time to serve in that role. When I got appointed, I was 31, I believe. And probably if I go back and still served another term, I'd still probably be the youngest. Most folks who serve in a commissioner or director of parks for a major system is probably in their closer to their retirement age. And so I was very proud of that effort. I would say a variety of experiences helped me be successful in parks. One, even though I was in supply chain logistics, I had to really operate in efficiencies. I managed lots of folks, variety of frontline employees in a variety of business areas, again, from shipping to inventory management to order replenishment, and really had to figure out how to give appropriate feedback so that a fairly routine task, like, packing boxes on a truck, could be better improved. And much of the work, at least on part of it, around parks, is very routine. So we have crews, we have routes, in order to make sure that parks is maintained well and is clean and mowed every 7 days. You have to follow a particular set of kind of routines. And so, I kind of came in very early and said, I actually think my first all staff meeting was, I might not know what type of grass that is, or the type of trees that we plant and how to plant them. But my role isn't to be the expert in that. My role is to be the expert in champion our department, gaining the confidence of our and buy-in of our stakeholders, notably the mayor and council and the public, handling the politics of just, when you're in a public space, lots of people have opinions about how that space should be better managed or better used, or in a construction project, people have ideas about what should go into that space, especially if there's a finite number of resources to build that space. And so my role was to champion all that and ultimately gain more resources and support them so that their lives would be easier, and to be able to do their jobs day in, day out, without having to worry about all of that. Also, when I first joined the city, I served as the first chief service officer. Much of the work was to work with the Atlanta civic community and philanthropic community to raise additional resources to reopen all the recreation centers, and then think through how do we transform them, not only into, from reopening just the facility itself, but actually bring some life into them and put in programs for young folks. And that, that's the other half of Parks and Recreation is we're constantly, we have a variety of types of programs, from swim classes to tennis classes to actual after-school programs that complement, folks who go to Atlanta public schools or the nearby charter schools or private schools. And so trying to think through the types of programs that would be compelling for the community at large, as well as specifically our young folks. And then as it relates to the construction, I guess, the only experience I had prior to was, we did an expansion when I was in supply chain logistics of retrofitting a portion of our warehouse and to, operate our business at the time in the middle of an expansion before we get to a newly renovated facility or portion of our existing facility renovated. The other would be back when I was a student at Georgia Tech. I gave a lot of input to the public space for the Fifth Street Bridge, representing as student body president on behalf of all students. That project could have, and again, it was a finite number of resources. I think it was X millions of dollars, and that can only go so far, especially if you have the engineering work that's required to make a stable park over a highway. And so had to have limited choices for students and to try to represent that well. And that's no different than what we did with our rebuilding the natatorium at MLK. At the time, it was just a giant box with glass, and it was a beautiful building. If you remember the old building that sits right next to Ebenezer Church, it was a beautiful building, but it was only a swimming pool. And so we thought, if we had a slight additional increase in the number of resources, what else could it be? And really leading a series of community meetings with the public, with citizens, especially nearby, and really asking them, okay, so we know it's going to be a pool because that's what it used to be. If we had other resources, what's the priority? Is it a basketball court? Is it an indoor track? Is it more meeting space? And ultimately, what we built was a combination of all those things, and to really leverage that back to be a vital community resource. The other way that we approached that particular project was we looked at our system. So at the time, I was managing over 500 park assets. Now, a park asset could be anywhere from a small little play lot with a playground in it, or to a large park facility like a Piedmont Park, which has multiple things within the park itself. And to really ask ourselves, how does our system look, and how do we leverage our this facility to be more unique, recognizing that we want other folks to go to other locations, and so it's a balance between a local neighborhood, direct community approach to a more regional approach. And some of the other projects I was very proud of when I was Parks Commissioner, there was a little known park concept at the time that was conceived when the Atlanta Beltline was thought of, called the Quarry Park, or West Side Quarry Park, which is what it's known today. And that was a plan that was put on the shelf because it didn't have any resources since 2008. And when I became commissioner, back in 2014, and about a year in, after getting my feet settled and understanding all of that dynamics and responsibilities of the department, really started to pivot towards, well, how do we make that a reality? I mean, that had been sitting there on the shelf since 2008, 2009. And it, when you go there today, because it's almost finished, to just to see what it used to be, it's just a night and day difference. And so I'm very proud of that work there.
I think what we're learning right now is that you really can just jump right in. I mean, take some educated guesses and risks, but nothing beats just getting your feet wet and trying something, building a coalition and partnerships. We've talked about partnerships a lot on the show. But all of those skill sets, they layer on top of each other, and you can really start all of that in college. And Amy is giving you such a wealth of information and example of how school is a platform that you can use to help further your skill sets, not just in class. So it's really great. Okay, I would really want to turn to some student questions because we've got some coming in. Okay, so we have some APS students joining us.
Yay.
I'm going to go with Arthur. He says, I'm a high school senior. I assume you're from APS. I don't know. What do you think school should teach us that it doesn't? And what should I be focused on outside of classes when I get to college? Well, that's a perfect tie-in to what we were just talking about.
Yeah, I think it's school is teaching you kind of all the basics, right? But most importantly, I think what I gained out of going through, I was a public school kid, and then again went to Georgia Tech, is how to think about problems and how to think about solutions to those problems. Mm-hmm. Not necessarily the actual subject. It's not that I do algebra or calculus today, but it was how to hear a word problem and to figure out, based on the method that I'm being taught, how to then try to tackle it with that method. And then over time, I guess, how to use the various methods that you were taught to then tackle a particular or approach a particular problem. And so I think what's critical as a high school student now is to learn how to be curious, ask questions, how to actually study, because that's oftentimes the hard, like to actually zero out all the other noise and to focus for a period of time to gain a proficiency in that subject matter that you're being tested on. And then that's no different in college. When you're in college, there's just probably more distractions, right? You have social kind of distractions, you have the academic rigor that could be harder, and then you're diving deep into a subject matter that you propose to yourself as a young person that you want to get more familiar with. When I started Georgia Tech, I actually started as a chemistry major. And was in lab on a Friday night at 10 o'clock and was like having to repeat my experiments too many times because it just kept like it had to be very precise. And I realized I'm not a good baker now. So I don't know why I thought I'd be a good chemist. But I took that route because I was like, well, I liked the abstract theory of chemistry, but in practice, I was not very good at it. And so I quickly shifted over to international affairs and economics just because it was something that was easier to land without a whole lot of revisions to the course that I was on in terms of adding more time to my college experience. And I wasn't planning to stay in international affairs, but what I liked about that, kind of degree was that it would, there was like, game theory, and there was different types of history that I was able to learn to understand the psychology at the time that was occurring for those policy decisions. And then to be able to then think through, okay, well, how do I actually apply that? And it was all very abstract. Mm-hmm. And then I tacked on economics, not for mapping out the break-even point that you might be studying today with macro and microeconomics, but more so from a urban social economics standpoint. I had a great professor at Georgia Tech who at the time served under President Clinton, Dr. Thomas Boston, over his kind of urban economics policies, and it was more of a overarching theme of how do some of the things that we decide today impact the communities and the lives of the citizens that we intended to serve tomorrow in 10, 15, 20-year increments. And that those are harder. There's a lot of, like, if we build a new park amenity or put on the arena consistently for voting, that could change the way that people interact with these types of facilities for both good as well as unintended things that we didn't expect. So that is how I would encourage you. So it's not a direct answer to this is what you should be studying, but more of an approach.
Well, you just said that you need to think about how to think and how to approach problems, and it's not always a straight line. So it's a great answer. Okay. Liza would like to know, how do you balance personal time with demands from your job and other commitments?
I'm not the best to answer that. I probably do too many. I'm on like 7 boards now. I probably need to drop 1 or 2. And sometimes, that's how I do it. Like I overcommit, and then I realize if I'm sitting in a meeting, I'm not as interested in the organization's mission, or they ask me to come on because it's my title and not necessarily my ability to contribute. And then to be honest with yourself and say you're not contributing to this effort, and so to try to pull back. But especially when I was at the city, where I worked at the city for a little over 8 years, I took very little vacation time. And I don't necessarily recommend that for young folks. But I balanced that off by, I took like a handful of days a year, worked through most holidays. And when I left the city, I refused to take any other commitments, including, and took the risk of delaying a potential job search, and took a sabbatical. I traveled to mostly South America, Africa for 3 months. And that was my way to balance out. Those are extremes examples. I was not very, I'm probably better now that I'm back in the private sector. And there's, when you go in the public sector, what folks don't realize is people can call you at all times, and there were unfortunate incidences that occurred overnight, like people breaking into facilities or jumping into pools when they're actually closed, and I would get calls at all hours, and so I don't get that at the private sector now, which is nice. It's still fast paced, and there's still a lot of demand, so I probably balance better today.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. Melanie would like to know, do you do a lot of public speaking, and how did you get comfortable and good at it?
I actually hate public speaking, but I've had to do it.
It's a good thing you went into government stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. When I was a student over time, just had to force myself. I was actually very shy and stuttered a bit up until probably freshman year of high school, and had to really practice being better at speaking. And it wasn't until I took a leadership program kind of early in my career at the city. I got invited to be a part of the NAE Casey Foundation hosted a few leaders, and I participated there. And they did a series of professional development, including better public speaking. And I think I got a lot of tips through that, like, how to relax right before you go into a public speaking engagement, how to better prepare 3 clear points. Don't try to overstate too many things. Don't overcomplicate it. Stick to very concise script, and then naturally the flow will be much better. Especially in an hour time, you can only get through a handful of points.
That's right. And you're the expert. So if you're the one speaking, then, theoretically, you know more about what you're talking about than most of the people in the audience, right? So
and you shouldn't hit people over the head with your expertise. Like,
that's right.
Sometimes folks make that mistake and go too technical or too many details.
Yeah, absolutely. Explain it like I would understand it. Yeah. Okay, so let's see. Okay, here's a good one. Chen is asking, I'm an Asian American Chinese and feel pressure at home about what I should be doing versus what I want to do. How did you handle that? And how much of what you do is what you feel like you have to do? Sorry.
Great question. I had, as an Asian American, had those expectations also. My parents immigrated here from Vietnam right before, 2 years before I was born, and had, kind of very clear expectations of get a really good paying job, and just do that and have a family. Those were the main expectations, and preferably as an engineer, doctor, or a lawyer. So I kind of threw all of that out the window, and over time got better about communicating where I was going with my parents in advance versus when I was in college. So when I was college, I didn't tell them I was running for student body president. I only told them when I had won. And my parents' first reaction, which at the time, was, why would you do that to yourself? Like, what about your academics?
Wow, sounds like we had the same parents, Amy.
I'm like, it was fine. And then when I went, they loved my time at the supply chain company because it was a very clear job. It paid well. And so when I threw it away to go work in the public sector, they didn't really understand. And so I think over time, just showing that I was can be successful and have been successful, I think that has changed their approach to it. Yeah. But it's still a work in progress.
Always. Not easy to navigate. Ben would like to know, what's the best and worst job experience you have ever had?
I've had a lot of challenging moments. I would say when I was in the supply chain logistics company, I got assigned to an overnight project, meaning the start time would start at 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. And it was to expand a portion of our warehouse and manage all the inventory movements there. And I was like 20, I don't know, 24, 25, and going, you got to be kidding me. But I made, lemonade out of those lemons, in that I decided to try to be as successful as possible in that project to reduce the time of being on that project. So really shifted the timetable of that execution of that project. And then I used the daytime to then not have great work-life balance, but then to go work pro bono for a couple nonprofit agencies, notably Leadership Atlanta. And that kept me more engaged. I didn't sleep at all. So while it was not necessarily the best time in terms of just the physical nature of it, I turned it around and really made it an opportunity for myself. And I've been in the when I was a high school student, I worked in the as a server. Those are challenging moments. I appreciate our servers today, but I was a poor kid, and so in order to do all the other extracurricular activities, had to go work, and so that wasn't necessarily fun. But in general, I've actually taken each of those experiences, whether I love them or not, and really have grown out of them.
Yeah, it all builds on each other. Okay, we're quickly running out of time, so let's do one more question. Landry wants to know, do you have any mentors? It's a good one to end on.
Yeah, I'm very fortunate to have a lot of mentors, actually mostly women mentors that have been in the Atlanta civic community for quite some time. And I met them through chance. So the first mentor I could say that I really had is Ann Kramer, who a lot of you might know of.
She was on the show.
She was on the show, and she used to be an executive at IBM. Yeah. And I met her when I was on that youth board for the People TV public access television station. And we were asking for resources at the time. And I went with another adult, and she had to run and take a bio break. And Anne got to know me then. And then, the beauty of mentors is that they put you in places that you can never see yourself. And so she quickly wanted, more student voices, a part of the civic community. And so I got asked to join United Way on an advisory group as a college student. So Anne would be one mentor. Another mentor is Lori George Billingsley. She is the Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer for Coca-Cola. Mm-hmm. And she and I met through a formal way when I went through Lead Atlanta, the Young Professionals Leadership Program. We were paired as mentor-mentee. And one of the first questions she asked me is, what do I want to do when I grow up? Because at the time I was working for the supply chain logistics company, but really excited about the politics and the civic involvement. And clearly there was a disconnect, and she could tell. And so she really challenged me over the years to follow my passion versus following what I thought I would be professionally good at and make a lot of money for. And so because of her, I was confident enough to make the leap from private sector back into the public sector. And then I would say Martha Brooks is also a mentor. She is one of the handful of women leaders who've been a CEO or a president of a company, a major company of Novellis. And she's on a lot of boards, corporate boards, and leading strategy there. And she's also doing a lot of chairs, a lot of civic boards, most notably CARES. And so I would say that in all of my advice for you and mentors is to try to develop a long-standing relationship and to show up. That's how you get mentors, is you actually show up. It's not like introducing yourself and being paired up formally. It's actually following through over the long haul. And in all of my major life decisions, I've called on a variety of mentors over the years, almost like a board of directors, where I'm like, okay, here's the path. Is it still on the path, and is it true to what I'm trying to do, as they know of as a person, And so it has really helped over the years.
Yeah, absolutely. I call it my personal board of directors. Martha was also on the show. So, yeah, we've got the whole Amy contingent. All right. Well, Amy, thank you so much for joining us today. We have a lot more questions we could not get to, but maybe we'll post them online and see if Amy will answer a few. Okay, everyone, we have a website. Please go visit it. It is supernovacommemncements.com. We're going to post all kinds of internship opportunities, grant scholarship opportunities. So hop on over there, sign up for the mailing list. We will not spam you. We all hate spam. Only great things will come to your inbox. So sign up. Next week, we have an amazing show. Doug Busk is going to be joining us, and Doug has done all kinds of really cool things. Right now, he is head of enterprise communications at Emory University, but he also ran digital communications and social media for Coca-Cola. And he's worked in politics and all the things. So we'll talk to him next week. It'll be a great show. Also, because next week is my birthday. Yes, we're doing a birthday show. I will say happy birthday to myself next week. And yeah, so Amy, what advice, do you have any closing thoughts for our students before we leave today?
Just to follow your heart and your passion and go out and build your toolbox to achieving that heart and your passion. And then the toolbox, as I try to demonstrate, can look fundamentally different for everybody. And there's no wrong answer. And of course, I'm happy to answer any follow-up questions or follow-up direct contact. I think it's very important to give back, and I'm happy to spend more direct time if folks are interested. And I just want to say thanks to SuperNova and for hosting me.
Yeah, well, thanks for having us, and students, take advantage of that. If you have questions, post them. We'll get them to Amy. Have a great week. Make the most of this crazy, unique time. Some of you are back in person class, and some of you are still virtual, but it's a great time to really learn differently and interact with your professors and other people differently. People have kind of more time on their hands these days. They're more available. So reach out on LinkedIn and connect with people, find some mentors. So remember, it's a great time. It's a blessing to be a blessing. So be kind as you go through your day, and I will see y'all soon. See you next week. Bye.